The rain hammered against the massive glass windows of the private airport lounge like 1,000 furious fingers. Outside, lightning split the midnight sky into violent flashes of silver and blue. Inside, the atmosphere smelled of polished marble, expensive whiskey, and old money. Vivian Carter sat alone near the far corner of the lounge, clutching her sketchbook tightly against her chest. She did not belong here. Women like her did not fly private. Women like her spent sleepless nights begging investors not to demolish neighborhoods they had never even visited. But tonight, a canceled commercial flight and a last-minute transfer had landed her in the elite executive terminal reserved for billionaires and corporate royalty. Her pencil moved rapidly across the page. She sketched the small waterfront community of Riverside Commons from memory. The old brick homes, the family-owned stores, the tiny public garden where children played beneath strings of faded lantern lights. In 48 hours, the city council would vote on whether the entire district would be sold to Blackwood Urban Holdings. To everyone else, Riverside Commons was dying real estate. To Vivian, it was home. You draw it like it still has a future. The voice was deep, calm, dangerous. Vivian looked up sharply. Across from her sat a man in a perfectly tailored black coat, one hand wrapped around a crystal glass of bourbon. His dark eyes remained fixed on the storm beyond the windows, cold and unreadable beneath the dim amber lighting. Damian Blackwood, the billionaire behind the redevelopment deal, the man preparing to erase everything she loved. Vivian's stomach tightened instantly. Damian finally turned toward her, his expression smooth with terrifying control. "The truth is," he said quietly, "places like Riverside Commons only survive in sketches because sentimentality is worthless in the real world." The graphite in Vivian's fingers snapped clean in half. Silence flooded the lounge. Then she slowly closed her sketchbook and looked directly into the eyes of the most powerful man in the city. "You mistake greed for intelligence," she said softly. And for the first time that night, Damian Blackwood smiled. The storm intensified outside, rattling the tall windows of the executive lounge with violent bursts of thunder. But neither Vivian nor Damian looked away from each other. Damian swirled the bourbon slowly in his glass, the ice clinking softly beneath the heavy silence. "You think I'm a villain because I understand how the world works," he said calmly. "Emotion doesn't build cities. Capital does." Vivian's jaw tightened. "And destroying families is just collateral damage to you?" She fired back. "You sit in skyscrapers making decisions about people whose names you'll never even learn." Damian did not react to the accusation. That almost made it worse. Instead, he leaned back into the leather chair with unsettling composure, studying her like she was a puzzle he had already solved. "You're passionate," he admitted quietly. "That makes you dangerous. Passionate people confuse ideals with solutions." Vivian felt heat rush in her chest. "You know nothing about me." "No," Damian replied smoothly. "But I know your type." Before Vivian could respond, a sharp announcement echoed through the lounge. "Final boarding call for Blackwood Air Flight 7. Damian stood, adjusting the cuff of his expensive black coat with effortless precision. Then his dark gaze returned to her sketchbook one final time. "Keep drawing your dreams, Miss Carter," he said quietly. "The real world is far less merciful." And with that, he disappeared into the storm-dark hallway beyond the lounge. Morning sunlight spilled across the glass towers of downtown Manhattan, but Vivian barely noticed it. Her stomach had been in knots since midnight. She pushed through the doors of Carter and Vale Architects, carrying 2 coffees and a folder filled with emergency redesign proposals for Riverside Commons. The office was silent. Too silent. No music. No drafting chatter. No laughter from the junior designers. Every employee stood frozen near the central conference table, their faces pale with dread. Vivian slowed instantly. "What happened?" she asked carefully. Before anyone could answer, the conference room door swung open. Heavy footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor. Vivian's breath caught sharply in her throat. Damian Blackwood stepped into the office wearing a charcoal suit so perfectly tailored it looked almost armored. His presence alone drained the air from the room. Behind him stood a team of corporate attorneys. Damien's cold eyes swept across the frightened employees before finally landing on Vivian. Recognition flashed between them instantly. A faint smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "Good morning," Damien said smoothly. "As of 8 a.m., Blackwood Urban Holdings officially owns this firm." Shock exploded through the room. Vivian felt her pulse slam violently against her ribs. Damien continued walking toward the conference table without breaking eye contact. Then he delivered the sentence that shattered her world completely. "And Miss Carter," he said calmly, "you'll be working directly for me." The executive floor of Blackwood Urban Holdings felt less like a corporate office and more like a fortress built for kings. Glass, steel, silence. Every surface gleamed with ruthless perfection. Vivian stood in the center of Damien Blackwood's private office, gripping the strap of her bag tightly enough to hurt. Damien remained near the massive floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, his broad shoulders outlined against the gray skyline. Without a word, he slid a thick black dossier across the marble desk. "Open it," he ordered calmly. Vivian hesitated before flipping the folder open. Her blood ran cold instantly. Riverside Commons. Every page contained demolition layouts, luxury tower renderings, and profit projections worth billions. "You can't be serious," Vivian whispered. Damien's expression never changed. "Luxury retail, private residences, waterfront entertainment district," he said smoothly. "The project begins in 6 weeks." Vivian slammed the folder shut. "No." The word echoed sharply through the office. "I won't help you destroy that community." For the first time, Damien moved closer. Slow, controlled, dangerous. "You misunderstand your position," he said quietly. Vivian lifted her chin defiantly. "Then fire me." Damien stopped inches away from her. His dark eyes locked onto hers with terrifying intensity. "If you walk away," he said softly, "someone far more ruthless will replace you tomorrow." Then his voice dropped even lower. "But if you stay, you might still save something." The city skyline burned gold beneath the setting sun as Vivian sat alone in a nearly empty architecture studio. Everyone else had gone home hours ago. Everyone except her. The glowing 3D model of Riverside Commons rotated slowly across her computer monitor. Glass towers, luxury rooftops, waterfront restaurants designed for people who would never understand the neighborhood they were replacing. To her coworkers, Vivian had become a traitor overnight. The woman who sold her soul to Damien Blackwood. Let them believe it, because while the others whispered behind her back, Vivian had been quietly searching through Blackwood Urban Holdings' internal files for something far more valuable. Proof. Proof that Damien was exactly the monster she believed him to be. Bribery, illegal zoning deals, hidden offshore accounts, anything. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard as restricted folders flashed across her screen. Nothing. Every financial trail was flawless. Too flawless, which meant the real secrets were hidden somewhere else. Vivian leaned back slowly, her heartbeat beginning to rise. There was only one place powerful enough to hide the truth. Damien Blackwood's private server. Her eyes drifted toward the dark executive hallway at the far end of the building. Silent, empty, dangerous. Vivian grabbed her coat, slipped an encrypted flash drive into her pocket, and stood. Tonight, she was Fina. The executive hallway was swallowed in darkness, illuminated only by the faint glow of emergency floor lights. Vivian moved silently across the polished marble, her pulse pounding harder with every step. Damien Blackwood's office stood at the very end of the corridor, like the entrance to a predator's den. Locked. Vivian glanced over her shoulder before entering the override code she had memorized earlier that week. Click. The glass door slid open. The office smelled faintly of cedarwood and rain. Vivian moved quickly toward the sleek black server beneath Damien's desk, kneeling as she inserted the encrypted flash drive into the port. The monitor flickered alive. Transfer in progress. 20%. Her breathing slowed slightly. 40%. The silence around her became unbearable. 70%. Then, ding. The soft sound of a private elevator arriving shattered the quiet. Vivian froze. Heavy footsteps stepped onto the marble floor outside. Measured. Calm. Telefingli familia. Damien. Her heart slammed violently against her ribs. 82%. The footsteps drew closer. 86%. Vivian yanked the flash drive free and dug beneath a massive mahogany desk just as the office door opened. The overhead lights snapped on. Polished black shoes entered her line of sight. Damien stopped directly beside the desk, so close she could hear the slow rhythm of his breathing. Then he sighed quietly. Not angry, exhausted. Vivian curled deeper beneath the desk, pressing one trembling hand tightly over her mouth to silence her breathing. Above her, Damien opened a drawer. Papers shuffled softly. For several agonizing seconds, the only sound in the office was the distant hum of Manhattan traffic far below the skyscraper windows. Vivian's pulse thundered in her ears. Had he noticed the active server? Had she left fingerprints? A trace? Anything? Damien remained motionless for a moment longer, and somehow that silence felt more dangerous than shouting ever could. Then his phone buzzed sharply. Yes, he answered quietly. His voice sounded different tonight. Lower. Tired. I'm looking at the final housing contracts now. Vivian's eyes narrowed slightly. Housing contracts? Damien leaned heavily against the edge of the desk above her. For the first time since meeting him, he no longer sounded like an untouchable billionaire. He sounded worn down. I know the board wants higher returns. He continued coldly into the phone. But the original agreement stays exactly as it is. A pause. Then his tone hardened instantly. I don't care how angry the investors are. Vivian frowned beneath the desk. Investors? Housing agreements? None of it matched the ruthless image Damien had shown the world. Footsteps moved again. The lights switched off. The office door closed. Darkness swallowed the room once more. Only then did Vivian finally exhale. Rain battered the windows of Vivian's apartment as she sat motionless before the glow of her laptop screen at nearly 2 in the morning. The encrypted files from Damien's server had finally unlocked. Vivian leaned forward instantly, her exhaustion disappearing beneath a rush of adrenaline. Folder after folder opened across the screen. Financial reports, board agreements, investor contracts. She searched desperately for corruption, for proof. For the monster she was certain Damien Blackwood truly was. But the deeper she dug, the less sense everything made. Every transaction was legal. Every account balanced perfectly. Frustration tightened in her chest. Then she noticed a hidden folder buried beneath the primary development files. Project Horizon, confidential. Vivian clicked it open. A massive architectural blueprint filled the screen. Her breath caught sharply. Behind the luxury waterfront towers of Riverside Commons sat something entirely different. Affordable housing complexes. A public medical center. A fully funded community school. Vivian's eyes widened in disbelief as she opened the legal documents attached beneath the renderings. The luxury district was never the final goal. It was the funding source. A legally binding percentage of all future profits would secretly finance the housing, school, and healthcare projects for decades. The investors could never touch the money. Vivian slowly leaned back in stunned silence. The truth hit her all at once. Damien had never been destroying the community. He had been trying to save it. The underground parking garage echoed with the sound of heavy rainwater dripping from concrete beams overhead. Headlights cut sharply through the darkness as a sleek black sedan rolled down the entrance ramp. Then suddenly, Vivian stepped directly into its path. The tires screeched violently against the wet concrete. The car stopped inches from her knees. The driver's door flew open. Damien emerged instantly, fury flashing across his face. Have you completely lost your mind? He snapped. Vivian marched toward him through the rain, soaked to the skin, clutching a stack of printed documents against her chest. She slammed them hard against the hood of the car. The confidential blueprints scattered beneath the glow of the overhead lights. Damien froze. For the first time since meeting him, genuine alarm crossed his face. You access my server, he said quietly. What? Vivian shouted over the storm. Why would you let everyone believe you're some heartless monster? Rainwater streamed down Damien's face as silence stretched between them. Then slowly, the cold corporate mask he wore so perfectly began to crack. Because the truth doesn't attract investors, he admitted softly. Vivian's breathing faltered. Damien stepped closer. I grew up in neighborhoods exactly like Riverside Commons, he continued. And rich men only spend money when they believe they'll become richer. Lightning flashed across the garage. You can't save people with good intentions, Damien whispered. You save them with power. The rain slowly softened around them, fading into a steady rhythm against the concrete ceiling above the garage. Vivian stood frozen, staring at Damien as if she were seeing him clearly for the very first time. Not as a billionaire, not as a corporate predator, but as a man carrying the crushing weight of impossible choices completely alone. Damien glanced down at the soaked blueprints scattered across the hood of the car. If the board discovers the real funding structure, they'll kill the project immediately, he said quietly. The housing dies. The school dies. Everything dies. Vivian's chest tightened painfully. All this time, she had believed she was fighting the villain. But Damien had already been fighting the war long before she arrived, and he had been doing it alone. The storm air between them felt electric now, charged with something far more dangerous than anger. Understanding. Damien looked directly into her eyes. So tell me, Vivian, he asked softly, do you want to expose me and feel righteous? He stepped closer. Or do you want to help me finish this? The city lights reflected in the rainwater between them as silence stretched heavily through the garage. Then Vivian slowly reached for the printed documents. One by one, she tore them in half. Damien watched her carefully. I'll help you protect it, Vivian said firmly. And for the first time that night, Damien Blackwood looked genuinely relieved. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button. Subscribe so you never miss a story, and drop a comment telling us where in the world you're listening.